Welcome, everyone. We will get started here in just one moment. I am making a few final changes. Welcome, everyone. We will get started here in just one moment. And apparently one of these final changes was muting on YouTube. So I'm watching comments on Discord, YouTube, and Twitch, in addition to chat from Zoom. Make the joke of, do you really do OSINT if you don't get hit with CAPTCHAs? Do you even webinar if you don't have like 24 chats open? Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. Gord is in the office. Apparently Gord has decided to take a nap. So hopefully we don't hear any snoring out of Gord. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to rearrange the screens one more time. There we go. So welcome to this month's webinar from All right, let's get started. I am unmuted, apparently. I had to verify that. So very quick video introduction. Welcome to this month's webinar from the OSINTion. The OSINT you can do. This is a little bit gimmicked, to be entirely honest. I did leverage ChatGPT to help me out with this, but not entirely as much as one would think. But this is in some ways kind of an introductory OSINT presentation. I just wanted to provide something out there at no cost, and I've got an announcement at the very end that's going to be pretty interesting for some people, I suppose. But thank you for agreeing to spend about 5 hours. 5 hours. Oh, no, I was looking at the rest of my schedule for the day in my head. Thank you for agreeing to spend about 1 hour of your day with me while I share this information. In the chat, I am seeing a question of where am I based? I am based in the Eastern United States. That's about as precise as I am willing to get. Just, kind of the OPSEC perspective. And based on the response, I'm going to say you're probably somewhere in, I'm going to say the United Kingdom or Europe, but I could be wrong. Maybe Australia. Either way. With that being said, here's my obligatory statement of I have a face made for radio, and let's get started. So about me, I am the founder, principal instructor, and content developer at the OSINTion. I have a day job doing threat intelligence and hunting as well. Beyond that, I served in the Navy navigating submarines. I've got some certifications, and I've written for a variety of platforms. The platform I'm most proud of would be writing practical social engineering with No Starch Press. If you're interested in acquiring the book, there are links. osint.mobi is my bit.ly redirect domain, so it is safe. I will never attempt to fish someone from my own persona. I will always portray a character if I'm doing that, so it is safe. This being said, if you're going to DEF CON, I'm going to say 90% be there, and as a byproduct, I will, if if I do actually make it, which all signs are pointing that way right now, I will be doing a signing at the No Starch booth within DEF CON, and they will be selling copies as well. The competitive side of me, I've competed in a variety of trade slabs competitions as well as other OSINT and social engineering competitions. I'm the 2017 DerbyCon Social Engineering Capture the Flag winner. I've been on the winning team for the last 3 years at DEF CON in the OSINT search party. As a byproduct, I have decided to retire. So if you decide to compete this year, you will not be competing against me, but I may be your judge. I will also be a coach in the social engineering community at DEF CON as well. Moving forward, standard disclaimer of the thoughts and opinions in this presentation do not reflect those of my employers, past, present, or future. So let's dig in. Are you all excited to pick up some OSINT? Maybe just some thought processes or analytic structures or anything along those lines? Anyone excited for that type of stuff? Okay, good deal. I'm seeing some super excited here. Good deal. So no. Don't worry about my alts. They're pretty low key these days. But let's start. Oh, the info you can find. So here are some things you can find via OSINT techniques: personal identifying information, business information and relationships, military movements, biases for news and proposed bills, of course, cryptocurrency transactions, and geolocating images and events. Notice the way this is built. You can do more than one of these in the same investigation, right? As we've seen since Russia invaded Ukraine, you've got things like Eyes on Russia and other organizations that are actively watching and seeing what is happening in Ukraine. You've got people like Ray Baker watching some commercial ships out there that are trafficking oil and other resources into Russia. Of course, the personal identifying information, we don't necessarily want to actively seek PII, but if you're looking for a missing person, whether it be in a Trace Labs competition, another similar competition would be Skull Games or other similar types of events, or if you're working as a private investigator, of course you want to find personal identifying information. The business information and relationships, absolutely. I've been turned on to a couple of organizations just recently that are very politically biased, and they are producing some pretty solid disinformation. And my first step was to go and find who's funding this, who's involved. And when I saw the list of names of who was involved using things like open corporates and little sis, it didn't surprise me. So keep all of this in mind. OSINT is not just using ReconNG or Spiderfoot or Maltego to put in a domain and find out everything about the domain. There's a lot of good stuff to be found about domains, but anytime you use any tool, you run the risk of introducing unnecessary noise to your investigation. From open source analytics that you search, we consider these OSINT sources. Social media. That is probably the brunt of our OSINT sources, especially if we're investigating people. That is probably our best vector. But you also have things like videos. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I say a video of any length is worth 10,000 words or more, because there's so many different ways that you can analyze it. You can analyze the actual language, the spoken language of what language are they speaking, but also what tempo do they maintain? What filler words do they use? What nuances or hyperbole do they use? Are there any colloquialisms that they are using? And that can help you further. You can go and even isolate the white noise in the background of a video and say, is it 50 hertz electricity or 60 hertz electricity? Search engines. I mean, the OSINTion has a 4-hour course that's probably about to grow to at least 6, if not 8, about search engines. And as a byproduct of that, they are a very powerful source of OSINT. And when we talk about any intelligence work, regardless of whether it is, when we're talking about anything with a search engine, anything intelligence oriented, really, the question is not, the key to being successful is not what you ask, it's how you ask it. The same goes for social engineering. If I'm trying to find out someone's mother's maiden name, I don't say, hey, what was your mother's maiden name? Because we are conditioned to resist answering that question. We say, what was your mom's name before she was married? Or who's your mama's people? That is how I go about it. Public filings. You've got the actual public filings associated with publicly traded companies. And then you have things associated with filing with the local secretaries of state. We have things with open corporates, open governments, open states. You have things like Court Listener, Pacer, Judy Records, and then you have things like Little Sis. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, check out the YouTube video or podcast that we did about 2 or 3 weeks ago now with Teddy Wilson. It's short, but it's very sweet. And then, of course, the internet infrastructure. What can you find via DNS? What can you find via TLS certificates? What is Shodan telling you? What kind of breach information can you find? Just try out OSINT to discover. The only thing you have to be successful in OSINT, really, is an inquisitive mind. Of course, having a web browser is going to help you because you have to be able to view data somewhere. But having Linux and programming experience can be useful. But I will tell you, through the majority of my investigations, I have used the Linux and programming stuff a few times, but not as often as one would think. It's something that more often than not, a browser is more than sufficient. The problem you run into with a browser is, for some things, like if you're doing EXIF analysis, the website may store your images, they may log your requests, so having things like a VPN can help. The intelligence you can uncover. Some examples of things that have been uncovered using OSINT techniques: locations of oligarchs, human rights abuses, military operations themselves, and then missing people. Anytime you've got a missing person, whether it's something like the Gabby Petito case, Summer Wells, or the missing indigenous people in Alaska or Montana, the OSINT is very powerful for that. The true crime world uses OSINT very heavily. They don't necessarily follow the same set of rules that we do, but they do a lot of similar stuff. With the human rights abuses, there was a population of Muslim people in China that were suffering human rights abuses. The OSINT world stepped up. And, I'm not going to gloss over and pretend that militaries around the world and embassies and diplomats and intelligence organizations are not using OSINT, because they are. The acronym OSINT comes from U.S. military. Look in the news for confidential reports. I'm going to be honest. Something being off the record, that is a myth. Anything that is said to a journalist is fair game. And honestly, the news will often share more than they say. And to that end, you've got to factor in the comment section. Comment sections, because the news is not just a broadcast at noon, 6, and 11 p.m. anymore. It quite literally is 24/7. And I'm not referring to channels like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. I'm referring to the fact that you have ABC.com, CBS.com, CNN.com. And what happens, they post something to their website, they share it to social media, typically with a fairly inflammatory or clickbait oriented title that's going to get people arguing, just being honest with some dystopia here. And as a byproduct, people weigh in the comment sections. Of course, you have a lot of things of, oh, well, sharing in insert city here or thoughts and prayers. But people who know about a particular topic will also typically weigh in the comment section. From the comments, we've got someone who's a big fan of randomly poking around. They were surfing the Russian web and found a VR museum tour that featured a bunch of photos of a secret missile component that they had on display. All I can say is, oops, and I hope you captured it in some way, shape, or form. Or follow a trail of forgotten retorts. Any online forum is a good source. Really. All your dark websites for shady exchanges. I'll be honest, for most investigations, you don't really need to use the dark web, because here's the reality of it. You've got company after company after company that are pulling data from the dark web, refining it, normalizing it, packaging it up, and selling it on the clear web. And as a byproduct, you don't need the dark web for that. For some things, depending on the type of investigation you're doing, if you're looking at a trafficking or something like that, yes, that can be very powerful. But for the vast majority of your investigative time, you will probably not be on the dark web. Of all the investigations I have done, only one investigation warranted me to spin up a Tor bridge and my own Tor browser and all of that fun stuff. And to the point from chat, criminals use the surface web to sell their stuff. They're trying to sell fake socials. That is absolutely correct. The reality is, you've got a certain group of people on the dark web that are going to be interested in purchasing things. But if you want to appeal to the masses, you're going to have to go off of the onion. Or enlist your social skills for insights. This is not entirely true in OSINT, but it keeps the theme. And if anyone figures out the theme that I'm referring to, feel free to put it in chat. But within OSINT, we should be as passive as possible. If we're talking about, for example, social media and investigating missing people, if we're talking about the color scheme, that's where I was actually going. And the color scheme being red team, blue team, purple team, orange team, green team, gold team, all of that. If we're talking about that, the OSINT team should probably be the transparent team. Hence the reason the OSINTion sibling company is Transparent Intelligence Services, because we should be stealthy. For the most part, we should be undetectable. Not entirely undetectable, but mostly. But if you want to be social, might I recommend joining the OSINTion Discord at osint.mobi/Discord. From the chat, someone's asking to go very brief into my dark web investigation stuff. Basically, it involved some pretty high-ranking officials. Some were presidentially appointed. I won't say which president appointed them. And it was involved with a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act violation that was going into litigation. And as a byproduct, some of the people were in very public roles. I had uncovered some data breach information about them from a variety of sources. And to leave no stone uncovered, I went into the dark web environment to do specific searches to see if I could find anything beyond what was on the clear web about said individuals. And in this case, I found some, but it was very little and it didn't really enhance the investigation. But because this was one of those, we'll say, a white glove type investigation, I wanted to make sure that I left no stone uncovered. Websites, forums, and documents too. Don't forget the Reddit and the Chan ecosystem. You've got Reddit, 2chan, 4chan, 8kun. Some of you may be familiar with it, but the Chan and Kun ecosystem, that's all based off of Japanese honorific titles, because you've got the most honorific, which would be San, kind of a peer would be a Chan, and then the immature one, typically for boys, would be Kun. Chan can also be used as an honorific title for younger people, specifically girls. So 4chan would be girls, 8kun would be boys, based on the honorific system. And the extension and file type Google Docs can help you so much. If you know you are looking for a PDF or a KML or any sort of particular file, that can help you find it. Don't forget to commit the Missouri felony. For those of you that are not familiar with the Missouri felony, about a year or so ago, a journalist in the state of Missouri disclosed that a state-level website had hard-coded social security numbers and other PII into a website. They found it by hitting F12 or also view source if you want to right-click and go that route. As a result, the governor tried to weaponize the state police, had the journalist arrested, and attempted to prosecute them for Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, when in actuality, they just viewed the page source. From the chat, when I say undetectable, does it depend on what is at stake for me, or is it discipline no matter the case? I employ a certain level of OPSEC for everything I do. The only exception is if I am teaching a course or doing a webinar, I typically will not be on a VPN then, but that's more of a bandwidth and reliability perspective. For the most part, I try to practice like I play. I know that I'm not going to be fully anonymous in any way, shape, or form. I just take steps to protect what I am capable of protecting. And for things that I don't have the full capability of protecting, if there is an opportunity to use a deceptive technology or disinform, I will do that. So there are things that you can do with like browser isolation. You can use jump boxes, VPNs, of course, Tor and other things. And for some investigations, that makes perfect sense. In some investigations, it doesn't make any sense at all. So it's, to answer your question, it's a little bit of both. I have my baseline that I do all of the time. And then for some investigations, I will alter it depending on what the investigation itself is. Can give insights that shine through. Sometimes it's not what is there, but it's what is missing. Inference is a powerful tool. And with inference, that is one of the main arguments being used right now within the US intelligence community to push against an unclassified agency that would deal exclusively with OSINT. Because, oh, well, when you merge this with this other closed source data, it's super classified. Well, yeah, no one's telling you to downgrade that. 90% of the things that you may find in an investigation, and it's not always 90, sometimes it's 1%, sometimes it's 99%. But oftentimes in some investigations, the majority of stuff you find will be entirely unclassified and irrelevant for anything inference. Leave that unclassified and then classify what you need. But that is an argument above my pay grade and outside of my area of responsibility and concern at this time. Pay attention to emails and bank accounts. Email addresses and cryptocurrency addresses are gold. With a slight nod to the Anti-Trafficking Intelligence Initiative, follow the money. When you follow the money, you begin to follow the truth. Because let's be honest, and I'm going to give a nod to one of the attendees today, to quote the Wu-Tang Clan, cash rules everything around me. And basically, money talks. To give another East Coast hip-hop reference, mo money, mo problems. But at the same time, it's one of those things that we can very easily trace. We may not have access to some of the banking information without warrants, subpoenas, etc. But with cryptocurrency, we have full access to the blockchain for most coins, and we have the ability to follow those transactions. And with the right amount of time or training, you may also be able to get access to other databases from people and organizations that have far more insight than what is right there. And from the chat, someone has heard that they're actually talking about its implementation. I assume you're talking about an unclassified agency specifically dealing with open source intelligence, and that the conversations are occurring behind closed doors. And you're absolutely right, as far as I can tell. There's a few accounts that I follow on LinkedIn that are in the know on this kind of stuff and privy to those conversations. And I watch their public discourse to try to get some insight into what's going on. These research methods all help mount. And this pretty much continues the conversation that we've been having as a sidebar, because OSINT does enable other intelligence disciplines. OSINT can be confirmation for something derived from human intelligence or signals intelligence or electronic intelligence or acoustic intelligence. Or alternatively, it can be that initial lead that you need to ask the right questions using those closed source techniques. So start open source, then cross-populate your proprietary and more, we'll say, stealthy sources and techniques. Because at the end of the day, collecting a bunch of stuff off the internet is not really intelligence anyway. Intelligence is taking the time to analyze it, discern what is going on, and provide a narrative to enable some form of decision making. That's ultimately what we are trying to do in any form of intelligence. Go to databases, sites galore. Data breaches are our friends, and so are the people and the hoarders that collect and publish them. Because let's be honest, we all know some hoarders, and with the hoarders that we know, we have to love them because they will collect anything and be like, hey, dude, I happen to have the full context text of the RAID forums breach. You happen to want a copy? Well, of course I do. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but sure. And you know, those people, I'll say this in somewhat jest, but in some way they are really doing the Lord's work. Sometimes you have to pay to see this data. Sometimes it's just out there for the picking. And either way, it's always a blessing to come across it. And even journals and newsletters galore. You know, you've got things like Bellingcat, Teddy Wilson, Overt Operator. These are journals and journalists and newsletters that are worth taking a look at. They use the same techniques we use. They find things that actually provide what we need. In some cases, they provide things that are essential to helping us get our hypotheses correct. And sometimes they just show us a new technique. But either way, they are something that I highly appreciate. From deep web sources and public records, the whole open ecosystem, things like open states and open corporates. That's entirely solid. Then you've got things like Pacer, Court Listener, Judy Records, Little Sis, all of these things. And then you've got some journals, media outlets, and newspapers that completely spider entire states' databases, the public databases. And basically, open science is mentioned in the chat as well. Yeah, absolutely. It's part of that ecosystem. But, things have to be kept to meet regulatory requirements. They have to be retained for X amount of time. And as a byproduct, a lot of them are digitized. Sometimes they still try to charge you a processing fee. Sometimes they still want you to come in and fill out a form or call somebody. But at the same time, because these records are kept, they provide something for us to operate off of. And that's very powerful. What a wealth of data you'll acquire. As I said before, it's not what you ask, but it's how you ask the questions. And that's really what it boils down to. The difference between a mediocre intelligence investigator and an excellent intelligence investigator, to some degree, it deals with what they have access to. To some degree, it deals with their techniques. But at the same time, it also is how they think. It is how they pose the questions or construct the hypotheses when they start to conduct an investigation. That's what it really boils down to. And in courses from the OSINTion, that for the most part, that's what I try to teach. I don't like to focus on teaching tools because I've been burned in the past. Tools have changed. And I found out about 25 minutes into a 2-hour class, and I just had to say, hey, you know what? I'm sorry. I ran an update last night. Everything that I was going to teach you is null and void. And as a byproduct, I'm going to give you your money back. I've been burned. I've been there. So it's more prudent to focus on how to build those analytic structures, how to build your own processes and workflows. If you have a username, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're using Migrate, Sherlock, or What's My Name. If all three of those go down, you still know how to run the username analysis. If those tools go down, someone out there still has the JSON file that's got the master list of all of the things that any or all of those resources will be checking. And as a byproduct, you can still go through and do the manual checks yourself. That is an example of what I'm referring to. New prospects and patterns and trends that arise. I'll be honest, I used ChatGPT to create the headers of every single slide here, and it's all going to make sense at the very end if it's not making sense yet. But things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, ChatGPT, new data sources, you've got new social medias. That could be things like truth.social, Parley, MeWe, Gab, Blue Sky, Mastodon. And some of these are not necessarily new, but they're new to the mainstream. And then you have things like new laws, regulations, and standards, things like Prop 24 and CCPA in California, GDPR, Virginia State Bill 1392, and other similar things. And within the field of AI and machine learning, the whole data science perspective, you've got things like natural language processing, whether you're using ChatGPT for that, whether you're using natural language toolkit, you could be using PyTorch, TensorFlow, building your own recurrent neural networks and long short-term memory models for that. You could be using Markov chains, whatever you want, but that's a new way to go. That is a new frontier. All the sources you seek to find and revise. The intelligence work is about the work in drawing the conclusions, the expert analysis, and the ability to connect those dots. And basically, it's applied hypotheses testing. Intelligence work sounds like it's super sneaky and you've got to be in the know to do it. No, really, you just have to be able to sit back and look at it objectively, connect the dots, and say, okay, From the beginning, the hypothesis was this one particular account. Is that true or false? Sometimes you will reject the hypotheses, as Quentin Tarantino is doing below. Sometimes you will accept the hypotheses, and sometimes it will be inconclusive. Some investigations will never be solved, period. That's just the nature of work. So go and explore through cyberspace. The info inside you can find with grace. That is not the end of everything, but that's kind of the end of the crux of this. Out of curiosity, anyone that's attending live, what have I just achieved? All right. So I wanted to do something a little gimmicky because I hadn't done a gimmick talk in some time. So I'm going to let you in on it. I have given you the wind beneath your wings, and I hope to continue to be the Zephyr to provide you the winds from the west beneath your wings. But no, I asked ChatGPT to rewrite Dr. Seuss's "Oh, the Things You Can Think" for OSINT. And that's what this is. So let's start from the beginning. Oh, the info you can find. From open source analytics that you search, just try out OSINT to discover. The intelligence that you can uncover. Look in the news for confidential reports, or follow a trail of forgotten retorts. Crawl dark websites for shady exchanges, or enlist your social skills for insights. Websites, forums, and documents too can give insights that shine through. Pay attention to emails and bank accounts. These research methods all help mount. Go to databases, sites galore, and even journals and newsletters galore. From deep web sources and public records, what a wealth of data you'll acquire. New prospects and patterns and trends that arise, all the sources that you seek to find and revise. So go and explore through cyberspace. The info inside you can find with grace. I was pretty impressed with this. I can always do something for bacon as well, whether it be Lord Bacon, Kevin Bacon, or the super tasty part of a pig. Don't feel ungrateful. This was supposed to be lighthearted for, just to give something out there. It's a lot of what I'm trying to do with this is I don't want to hit people all the time with the super elite techniques. I want to reinforce things so that people can understand, regardless of your background, there's a seat at the table for you for OSINT. And that's what this particular thing is trying to achieve. And I don't want to disparage or say, oh, well, stuff about the super elite techniques is bad. No, it's good. We need those. It's just sometimes we need to go back to the basics. And even as an advanced practitioner, I benefit from going back and revising the basics and building that foundation again. Yeah. Look in the news for confidential reports. I mean, the news will break things on you. I mean, look at what Bellingcat and the New York Times did with regards to the case of someone releasing U.S. intelligence reports. They didn't wait for the federal government to figure it out. They figured it out and made it public. And that ignited an entire storm of attacks against Bellingcat, accusations that Bellingcat is a CIA-funded PSYOP, which I could talk about that for days. I'm going to stop where I am because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. All I will say is look up the acronym of BRICS, BRICS, and that will lead you down a rabbit hole about what is going on. But I will leave that where it is. All right. Before we get to questions, though, I do have an announcement, and the announcements are always fun, right? So it's one of those things that we've just got to kind of stay on top of. And I'm doing something on another screen, so that's why I'm just kind of babbling for the moment to keep you in suspense for a moment. But I'm doing it with a particular purpose, just so that I can lead the suspense. Bear with me just a moment. All right, so I think I've babbled and fumbled up enough for you for right now. And as a byproduct, who is ready for an announcement of sorts? All right. So I'm announcing a new on-demand training course. It is officially live right now. It is the OSINT username tools course. We are covering Holehe, EPOS tools, OSINT industries, what's my name, Sherlock, and Migrant. Because the course is about an hour or less, it is only $10. If you want to access it, the link is in almost all the chats. Now I think it's in all the chats, but feel free to check it out. Like I said, it's a short course, but ultimately what it seeks to do is just help you gain familiarity with these particular tools and how to go about using them. So definitely sign up, take the course, leave comments in the course, tell me what you think, tell me how to improve it. If I left a tool out that you want, let me know. These are all free tools. EPOS has a paid tier, but OSINT Industries kind of answers that question. With OSINT Industries, it is new, so there's some potential concerns with that you may want to look into, but nothing specific that would be alarming. And to answer your question about the free to use tools, anytime I teach a course, and some of the people in this session can attest to this, I tend to not teach paid tools. If I show you something that is paid, I tend to say, hey, I'm showing you a paid tool. This is how much it costs. And even if I show a paid tool, the most expensive paid tool that I have ever demonstrated in a class is $100 a month. And you can do everything that tool does for free. It's just, I like using that tool in particular. The majority of paid tools that I may demonstrate are in the price range of like $30. But I don't like teaching tools to begin with. I don't like teaching paid stuff because a lot of people are just breaking in. They don't have the budget to do this. I don't really care about charging you for training and saying, hey, I'm going to charge you for this training, but you have to go pay this exorbitant amount of money for this other tool to learn what I'm going to teach you. I would rather partner with whoever is selling said expensive tool or data source and say, hey, let me write some training for you. Let's cut a deal financially and just include this training with your sales. because I try to do right by people. I'm not trying to get rich with the OSINTion, as evidenced by the cost of the courses, but it's one of those cases that, it just is what it is. So that's a bit of my philosophy as it relates to OSINT and teaching in general. But that's who I am as a person. I just want to do right by people. So with that being said, any questions? We've got about 15 minutes of time allocated remaining, so I'll field whatever questions within reason that I can. Bear versus gorilla. If we're talking about combat sports, specifically judo or jujitsu, I would go with a gorilla. Due to personal reasons, I would probably pick a bear. Any other questions? General question. Do I feel OSINT is becoming an established and sustainable professional discipline? What are the risks? I do think it is sustainable. I do think it is established. The problem is people's definitions of OSINT vary. Some people see OSINT as being exclusively social media or exclusively using tooling like Python tools or Holehe, ReconNG. And until we can get the actual tradecraft down into a unified definition that is widely accepted, and we can get everyone on board with the techniques and the terminology, because it's also known as open source investigations, online open source investigations, publicly accessible information, something to that effect. Until we can get that ironed out, it's going to be a rocky road. But a lot of positions are looking for OSINT. They may not use the term OSINT when they're looking for it. I've been doing some research into that with some career posts in general. And to that end as well, the fact of the matter with it is that a lot of people are looking for it, especially under the guise of journalism, threat intelligence, and a few other disciplines. So yeah, it's totally sustainable. I've been working full-time in OSINT or intelligence work for over 5 years now, I think. So 2 of the titles I've had in this time frame have had the word OSINT or investigator in them. So I absolutely see it. So that is definitely something to look at. In terms of a civilian intelligence agency, that kind of already exists, and it's called Bellingcat. But to that end, I don't foresee any formal government-sanctioned civilian intelligence agency like NOA or COA, like National OSINT Agency or Central OSINT Agency or something like that. I don't foresee that materializing just because of politics. Risks against OSINT as a profession. Honestly, the reality of OSINT as a profession, you can go obsolete very quickly. There's a reason Michael Basil released his Extreme Privacy and the open source intelligence techniques books pretty much annually. And that's because things change. People change, which is going to influence what is on social media. Data sources are going to change, whether that be in response to regulations like GDPR or privacy pushback or Congress summoning them to Capitol Hill to testify. It could also be for better advertising or monetization. You have that data sources are going to dry up, tools are going to dry up, they're all going to come and go. And that's why I try to focus on the processes and the tradecraft. So that's one of the complications. But if you are someone who continues to stay in the loop and continue to research and do what you need to do to be aware of changes to regulations, to data sources, and stay on top of tools, or even create your own tools, it's a fairly safe profession, especially whenever you get into something where you are considered kind of the dark wizard of sorts as it relates to things like within my workplace. I am kind of seen as a dark wizard because I can be handed a lot of disparate data and I will find a way to normalize it and make sense of it. I was able to attribute threat actors associated with a DDoS given not even a complete data set, but a disparate data set from a variety of sources in a non-normalized format. So no SIM. I was able to normalize that, and it took me about 6 days to get all the code written and the report published. But I ended up publishing about a 30-something page internal intelligence report. And then a couple of days after that, we were on a call with a vendor and the attribution was correct. So you can very easily look like one of those magicians of the dark arts pretty easily. And honestly, I used OSINT techniques more than threat intelligence techniques. I leveraged some of my knowledge of information and cybersecurity in how I framed what I was looking for, but that's how it worked. Without name dropping from chat, there are some very expensive OSINT training providers out there. And that in some regards is becoming an industry standard. The specific provider you're talking about, they price all their courses like that. So I don't hold it personally. I will say that with the course number change associated with their more entry-level course, that the course has improved. The previous version was just tool after tool after tool and not a whole lot of analysis from what I gather. I have not taken any training from that particular provider. But you have, I don't want to say cheap, but you have more affordable providers out there as well. Sometimes you do get what you pay for, but sometimes the training, it's actually over delivered and underpriced. And if that's the feedback I get about the OSINTion, I'm totally cool with it. If I over deliver and underpriced, that's my problem, not yours. And honestly, there are a lot of ways to find good training. Like, for example, I typically don't take other people's OSINT trainings. And it's not because I'm arrogant and I think I know everything. It's because I don't want to run the risk of plagiarism or anything like that. So if I don't take other people's trainings, then I'm not exposed to what they're talking about. I might look at the outlines, but not the course material. But I did recently just sign up for the Intel Techniques OSINT course and the OSIP. I figured now was just as good of time as any to, in the words of Tom Haverford from Parks and Rec, to treat yourself. So that's exactly what I did. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the definition with Bellingcat, I tend to agree with what you're saying. I'm saying that they are pretty much the closest thing to a civilian intelligence agency that we have at this time. As someone who is new to OSINT, how do you make sure you stay within the proper legal boundaries? That is a darn good question. And I could push all kinds of training at you based on that question alone. But realistically, a lot of it is your intuition. You have to ask, is this legal and is this ethical? And if you collect something, you need to secure it. So anytime I'm investigating a person, I treat their personal information just as if it's my own, because even if they are the most heinous criminal on the planet and they're dead to right guilty, if I don't properly protect that data, that can introduce things such as technicalities that could allow them to walk, or it could cause an innocent person to be incarcerated. So securing your data is very important, and just primarily follow the golden rule. Like, how mad would you be if someone did that to you? And there are a lot of gray areas. There's a lot of cultural differences, but if you stay passive and you don't communicate with the people and organizations you are investigating, you typically could stay out of trouble with that. But it's when you start to collect a lot of stuff and you don't secure it that you can really find yourself in trouble because of things like GDPR. OSINT analysts have a love-hate relationship with privacy regulations. Do I think GDPR-like laws at a federal level would hamper the effectiveness of OSINT? Yes and no. GDPR is, because I have several OSINT courses and I have an OPSET course. GDPR is a blessing and a curse. So you're absolutely correct with that love-hate relationship. It complicates the ways of which that we might be able to collect things, but at the same time, it affords a certain level of privacy. When I travel to the European Union, I specifically stay in an Airbnb. I connect to Wi-Fi without a VPN, and I try to opt out of as many things as I can. Some things they'll just say, oh, this is a residential French IP address, delete. Other things they'll say, hey, we thought you were a US citizen. We need proof that you meet the requirements under GDPR. But yeah, it is a blessing and a curse. They can hamper the effectiveness. Without being an entire hater about the US federal government, I like the concept in theory that the US would have a federal level law similar to GDPR. I just don't have faith in the government to be able to accomplish it without messing it up. So, as we're seeing with other acts like the Restrict Act, because of the lobbyist ecosystem, it would definitely be heavily sterilized. It would not be able to have the reach that it does because you have so many data brokers with a lot of money, the Palantirs, the LexisNexis, and several, all the credit bureaus in the United States are data brokers because they all have deep wallets. They can get into the right people's pockets and influence that. So I don't think it would ever show up that way. The CIA and other organizations offer free publications such as the Psychology of Intelligence Analysis, Analytic Thinking, and Presentation for the Intelligence Producers. Those are great with general processes. I do cover not those books in particular, but some free books in the Introduction to Intelligence report writing to help you produce better reports. So I'm always on the lookout for things like that. I agree about the industry expecting us to have expensive certifications, especially because some entry level, I interviewed with a US sports league and they wanted to pay me $30K per year without benefits, with no ability to side hustle for high level work, that during the championship time of their year, I would be working 80 hours a week. And I laughed at them. So yeah, OSINT people, some of them are paid really well, some of them are not. And the burden for someone to have those types of certifications is ridiculous. But the organizations that specifically run those training firms, they tend to operate under the assumption that an employer is paying for it and the employer values their training, and that's why they charge what they do. They follow the 80-20 rule. The best route for someone trying to break into the field and land their first job, I would say do research, take courses when you can, whether it's mine or anyone else's. I try to stay affordable for that reason. I am running an OPSET course this Saturday. There are coupons available, but the coupons are for 15% off. And the price of the course, I believe, is $260 without coupons, but it's a 6.5-hour course. With that being said, do that, but also consume whatever blogs, YouTube videos, and podcasts you can. And I highly suggest starting your own blog, whether anyone reads it or not. Spin up something on Substack or Medium and just write about things you investigate. Get active in a lot of Discords. You've got the OSINTion, you've got Trace Labs, you've got Bellingcat, you've got Case Scenarios, Overt Operator, Project Owl. There are so many OSINT discords out there. But you want to look outside of OSINT as it relates to pen testing, because there's a very small subset that believe that OSINT is only part of a pen test. So yeah. Can you link the sports industry with OSINT? And this is my final question, because I do have a hard stop like 30 seconds ago. Directly, not entirely, but it would be primarily monitoring players and trends. No worries. You're monitoring trends on social media, and you're monitoring for kind of like in-person threat intelligence for games and other things. So, during the Stanley Cup, during the Super Bowl, during the World Series or the NBA Finals, watching for credible threats. That would be OSINT techniques as it relates to professional sports. Can you be security illiterate and an OSINT expert? I struggle with the word OSINT expert anyway. I'm just a skilled practitioner. The only person I will acknowledge as an expert in OSINT is Michael Basil. He's the OG of OSINT. We are all here because of the work he did years ago. That being said, you can totally be, honestly, even tech illiterate. I mean, having the security knowledge can be useful, but having security knowledge is not requisite for it, because there's so many other investigations that you can do. Journalists do OSINT. They don't really have a lot of security knowledge in a broad stroke. Some do. And you have people working in emergency management, law enforcement. They may not know about security. So yeah, it's totally possible. You really only confine yourself where you choose to. With that being said, here are some intelligence adjacent nonprofits if you want to try to help out. Safe Escape, they seek to help domestic violence victims get out and stay out. There's an intel and a counter intel perspective with that. You do have to be vetted with a background investigation. You have Trace Labs. They have the OSINT VM, OSINT Search Party, the CTF, and they are bringing ongoing ops back. Anti-Trafficking Intelligence Initiative, they try to disrupt things by monitoring dark web and cryptocurrency type stuff. Polaris, they maintain the National Trafficking Hotline. If you're interested in other content from the OSINTion, we are on Twitch, YouTube, Spotify, and we have a podcast that you can access using all of these osint.mobi links. The OSINTion podcast is also available on all of your favorite podcatchers as well. With that being said, I do want to say thank you for spending an hour of your day with me while I shared this with you. And if you want to follow myself or the OSINTion on the socials, here are the links. My apologies, I coughed and sent the slide forward prematurely, but here are the links. Thanks again. If I can be of any assistance, please reach out. And I did see a question. If you want to take the course that I announced today, but you don't want to take it today, it's an on-demand course. You can buy it today and take it a year from now. You can wait and buy it whenever you'd like. It's totally up to you. There's no rush. It's on demand whenever you get around to it. But with that being said, thank you, everyone. I do have to jump to the meeting that I am about 4 minutes late to. Thanks again, and I'll see everyone around.